friends, welcome to the Plaid X2 channel. My name is John. On this channel, we talk all things physical media, so movies, music, books. If you're into that kind of thing, go ahead and subscribe down below for more of that kind of content. Well, hey, this is episode number 4 of the 5, and this is a series where I get to have conversations with fellow YouTubers, fellow movie collectors, and I am loving these conversations. And so what it is, essentially, I ask 5 questions, and the people who are my guests, they answer with 5 films. And so each of these questions is meant for us to get to know these YouTubers a little bit better, a chance for us to talk movies in general, which is always fun. And then also we get 25 film recommendations, which is also awesome, unless you have a wish list that is growing and growing and growing that you're looking at going, how could I ever possibly afford all those films? So anyway, that's a little bit tough, but it's also kind of fun. So anyway, this is a great YouTuber who I've been watching for a little over a year now, Austin St. Pierre. And so if you haven't subscribed to his channel yet, his link will be down below for YouTube and for Instagram. So follow him there, subscribe to him here on YouTube. Great YouTuber, get a great film collection and a great content. So anyway, I had a lot of fun in this conversation, a lot of laughs, a lot of great film recommendations, and a lot of great conversation. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this episode I got to have today with one of my favorite YouTubers, Austin St. Pierre.
I had the Phil Collins soundtrack CD.
Yeah.
I listen to that all the time. I still go and listen to it all the time on Spotify and stuff like that. I'll be driving home from work at 1 o'clock in the morning, pop on my Phil Collins Tarzan soundtrack, be jamming out to that on the way home. But like I said, it's kind of like Toy Story for teenagers. So a little bit more of like a grown-up version. You kind of, you get the action, you get some rude humor and poop jokes and all that kind of stuff. It's fun. That's the one where there's like the running joke throughout the movie of like punching a certain way that makes you like poop your pants or something, right? That's the one. That's like the big thing I remember from the movie is he wants this like old guy to teach him how to punch someone a certain way to make them poop their pants.
Well, hey man, it is good to meet you. And I became aware of your channel about a year ago, and through your 31 film day challenge, and loved it. And every single day, I actually was highly anticipating you releasing the new video, and to get to see what other people are recommending, and to plug in what my answers were to your questions. And anyway, I love that series.
It was fun. I'm considering doing it again, but we'll see. I'd have to find a lot more questions to do.
Well, I was actually wondering if it was going to be like an annual thing for you, but then I thought, that's a lot of like genres for you to you have to be 31 different. Yeah.
Right. It'd have to be 31 completely different questions because a lot of those came down to like favorite picks, and your favorites don't change very often. So, so I feel like second time around, it'd be a lot more work.
It would be a lot more work to do. That's what I find with like, there's certain lists, like certain videos you put together, like your top 10 favorite, whatever. And, and when I do those, sometimes I'm like, oh man, I can't go back to this ever again.
Right.
Or at least for a long time, I can't go back to this one.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Yeah. Cause
anyway.
I did last year, I think last fall, I did like top 10 favorite movies of all time. I still get comments almost every day of people commenting their top 10 lists. And because it's the right thing to do, I still go and like heart all of them, and I try to respond to as many as I can. But it's like, look, this video is like months old now. Like, it's hard to like commit to like responding in the same excited way to all of those comments, because it's up to like 100 or 200 comments on it or something like that. Yeah. So yeah, I still get comments on that like every day. But part of me is like, man, like you said, once that list is out there, it's out there, and I mean, it's your top 10 of all time. That's going to be really hard to change those. Not that I want to change them, but
right. And there is like, I saw a movie this past week, Words on Bathroom Walls, and it's one of those ones that instantly became a favorite of mine. So every once in a while you'll come across a film where it'll adjust your list, but that's pretty, it's not all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. My kind of compromise in it is, I don't know if you use the app Letterboxd for like logging movies and stuff like that. It's kind of like a social media app for film lovers. So you can follow your friends and stuff on it, and anytime they post a movie review, you can like read through the movie review and stuff, and you can make lists and top 10 lists and all that kind of stuff. So I have a list on there called my top 10 favorite movies of all time, and then I have another list that's just called my favorite movies. So that list is like 50 movies long or something. And anytime I add a movie to it that's just a favorite of mine that I want people to see that is a favorite of mine, but not necessarily, didn't necessarily make the top 10 of all time, because it's a pretty complex list. So
Sure. The other one video I saw of yours that really took off fast, and I loved it, and I actually watched it a couple of times. I probably watched it 3 or 4 times actually, was this past year for Thanksgiving when you were doing your Black Friday stuff.
Yeah.
That video of yours took off pretty quick. And I was
Yeah.
revisiting it because I wanted to map out which stores I wanted to go to and where I was going to pick up which one.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that the one where I said like where the deals were going to be and what was going to be there?
Yeah. You actually had all of the advertisements from each of the stores.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was
I always do
helpful.
that myself. So this year I was like, you know what? I feel like I've put the work in. Like I want other people to benefit from this too. So I just was like, let me just compile this whole, thing with all the ads and stuff. So that's something I'm hoping I can do again this year. I don't know. November is going to be a really busy month for me. I haven't announced on the channel yet, but I might be taking a break in November because my wife and I are going to be moving during that month. So there's going to be a lot going on. So as much as I usually do a lot of stuff towards the end of the year, I might have to take November off just because of life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to, if you're looking for votes and you have the time and availability, I certainly benefited from that last year. So
yeah. If I got the time, that'll be at least, if I can only put out 1 or 2 videos that month, that'll definitely be one of them.
Yeah, it was awesome. I went back to it, I think 3 or 4 times because I was like, I can't remember which place had which thing, but I know Austin told me. So I went back to
exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing is like every store has different deals and different movies, and some of them only have a certain one. So I was like, if you're just scrolling through all these lists, you don't know where I've actually taken the time to figure out what's where, because I map out where I want to go. So I was like, I want other people to benefit from this too.
It was good, man. You got good content on your channel. And then the other thing that I really appreciate is your love of the Lord of the Rings, because I love the Lord of the Rings, and I don't understand any human being who doesn't love the Lord of the Rings. And your series, The Lord of the Rings, is the best, and here's why. So that's like an ongoing, never-ending series, is it?
It's at least ongoing until I finish the trilogy. I haven't gone back to it for a few months just because I've had so many other ideas for other stuff.
Sure.
And it just keeps getting pushed further and further back with me continuing. Like the next video, I already know what I want it to be. I want it to be the final Samwise speech at the end of Two Towers, because that's the last thing I need to do before moving on to Return of the King. But like I said, I've just had so many other ideas for other stuff I want to talk about. It just keeps getting pushed back.
Honestly, like Samwise, there's in all 3 films, he has certain things he says that I think are brilliant. Some of the best quotes of any film ever. And on grieving, on carrying people, on walking with people through their struggle and their suffering. All 3 of the films, you tie those things together and it's unbelievable. So those are my favorite parts.
For someone who had a pretty easy life up until the events of Lord of the Rings, he has some pretty interesting outlooks on life.
So before I dive into the 5 questions, 2 questions for you. How did you get introduced to the Lord of the Rings? And my father-in-law actually introduced me to the Lord of the Rings, and I had no interest in them. He introduced me to them. How did you get introduced to them? And was it movies or books first for you?
For me, it was the movies first. My dad introduced me to them around about when I was like 9 or 10 years old, I think. And according to a friend of his, he wasn't sure if I was quite old enough to see them in the theaters. So I didn't see them in the theaters. My dad ended up going by himself with a friend or something like that. And then around about when I was 12 or 13, when they felt I was old enough, he showed them to me. And I remember seeing Fellowship of the Ring, but I don't remember when I watched Two Towers or Return of the King for the first time after that. But I was introduced to the movies first. And then from that point on, once my younger brother was old enough to watch them, with the 3 of us watched them like yearly. It was like a yearly ritual to watch Lord of the Rings trilogy, the 3 of us. So that's always been something we always talk about. And I mean, now that we're all grown and moved out, it's something that would be really cool to kind of get together one time and do, because it's just something we haven't done for years. And because now that I'm grown, like I go back to the trilogy every other year, maybe every few years or something like that, just because life gets in the way. But it's something I try and stick to, at least watching every other year, if not every year, if I can. So, and it's getting crazy now that we're far enough removed from the trilogy that there's a large amount of people who at least never seen, if not never even heard of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which blows my mind, at least from the movie point of view.
Yeah.
Just because I'm like, how have you not seen Lord of the Rings? Like, even if you don't like it, like everyone's seen Lord of the Rings.
Right.
But that's just a generational gap that even though I'm still young.
I remember saying to someone, it was a coworker, and he was talking about someone, a mentor in his life. And I was like, oh, so he's like your Miyagi, and just a blank stare. And he was like maybe 10 years younger than me. And I was like, you don't know who Mr. Miyagi is? And he's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And I was like, I was like, I suppose it's early 80s.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is crazy when you start getting into the generational gaps of movies. And then you're like me, you start sounding ancient when you refer to your favorite films. But I want to introduce them to my daughter, but she's 6 and she is petrified of Smeagol. Which is funny because she loves to do his voice, but she doesn't want to see his face.
Yeah. She has mixed feelings.
Yeah. So I've tried to instill in her a certain level of compassion for him, because I actually feel a ton of compassion for him. And I try to do that, but she's not there yet. So one day we'll watch it.
Yeah.
So I watched a debate between Elijah Wood and Sean Astin on who the hero of Lord of the Rings is. And I know who I think it is, but wanted to throw it out to you. Who do you think it was between Frodo and Samwise, the hero of the Lord of the Rings?
I personally lean towards the side of Samwise. I could definitely see both sides, but I feel like with some of the big moments, specifically in Two Towers and Return of the King, you get a lot of quotes specifically referring to how Frodo, at the end of Two Towers, he's like, Sam or Frodo wouldn't have made it very far without Sam, when they're talking about stories and songs and tales and stuff. And then even at the very end, when Frodo can go no further, Sam has to pick him up and carry him.
Yeah, he's my pick too. As I mentioned, his lines throughout all 3 films are my absolute favorites. I have the 4 Hobbits in my office by my Lord of the Rings books, with my audiobooks. And I love the Hobbits, and Samwise and Frodo at the front. That friendship is the best friendship in any film I've seen. I love it.
Oh yeah. It's one of my favorites too.
Yeah. But in the debate, Elijah Wood picked Samwise because he said Frodo could never have done it without Samwise. But then Sean Astin came out and said it was Frodo, because if Frodo didn't have the courage, it never would have happened.
Frodo started it.
Yeah. So it was a fun debate to watch the 2 actual characters go at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were a team. Great friendship.
Absolutely.
Well, here are the 5 questions, man. Thanks so much for doing this. And you take the time. I have a list, like a wish list of YouTubers who I really hope say yes to doing this, and you're on that list. So thank you for saying yes to taking the time to do this. And so how it works essentially, if you've seen it, is I ask 5 questions and each YouTuber answers with 5 films. And the point of the whole thing was it's pretty selfish. One, I want to talk movies with other movie lovers. Second, I want to just learn more about the YouTubers who I love watching their content. I think these questions maybe give us a little bit of insight into these YouTubers. And then the last one is I selfishly get 25 film recommendations, and so does everybody who watches it. So so I appreciate you taking the time again to do this and sit down and share 25 films.
Yeah, well, your list might be 24 for me, because Lord of the Rings is going to be in there.
But you can't have enough copies of it, so who knows?
Exactly.
I almost
the only other copies I want to get are the DVD special editions. I don't have those.
I know, me too.
But you can get them. They're like $20-$30, but it's like, I just want them for display purposes. I'm not going to watch them. So I've seen them before at flea markets back before I wanted to collect them for like $5 each. So I'm like, next time I'm at a flea market and I see them, I'll grab them for like $5 each, because like they could be scratched up as ever, and I don't care, because I'm not going to watch those versions. I just want the cases to display with everything.
I was thinking, I know I've seen at least the Fellowship of the Ring on VHS. Do you know if all of them got a VHS release?
I think they did, because I feel like my dad had one of them, at least one of them on VHS.
Okay.
Yeah,
That'd be
because
pretty
I've like you,
cool.
I've seen at least the Fellowship of the Ring. But yeah, it would be cool like if I could get like every edition of Lord of the Rings that's been released, kind of thing, or at least every format.
Yeah. My favorite of the three is the Fellowship of the Ring. So even if I could find that one,
Hmm.
I'd be happy to find that one.
Yeah, yeah.
What's your favorite of the three?
My favorite's also Fellowship. I usually tell people my favorite battle is in the Two Towers because I love the Battle of Helm's Deep. That's my favorite one. But my favorite movie is probably Fellowship of the Ring. And I didn't really have a definitive answer until one of the last times I watched Fellowship of the Ring as to why. But I think it's because Fellowship of the Ring has the best mix of kind of everything that is Lord of the Rings. Like you get like it starts with like the happy innocence of the Shire and all that comes with that. But then you also get like the more scary and intense moments of the Balrog and all of that kind of stuff. So I feel like overall, and you get like introduced to the world of Middle Earth. So it's the first thing. So I think it's just partially because that's the first movie in the series. So it's the introduction to it all. But you also kind of get the best mix of all of those things where once you get to Two Towers and Return of the King, it's like you're in and it's all like serious and a lot of stuff. Like obviously there's a lot of humor spread throughout too, but I enjoy kind of the mix of the Shire and the innocence because that's really the only time we get to spend in the Shire throughout the whole series, except for the little bit in the Hobbit movies too. So
Right. Yeah, that's the same with me, is getting to know all those characters. I would personally love to live in the Shire. I think it's
mm-hmm.
amazing. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it's just everything about that film I love. So, and it
yeah,
was my father-in-law bought it for me um, when it came out on DVD, and
mm-hmm.
I knew nothing about the Lord of the Rings, and he gave it to me. He's like, "You have to watch this," and I was like, "I have no interest in wizards and elves and dwarves. I don't watch any
Yeah,
of that stuff." And
yeah,
I left it in the plastic for months, and then
mm-hmm.
I had nothing to do on a Saturday. I saw it in the plastic, and I was like, "Someday he's going to ask me if I've watched this, and it's going to be really rude
Yeah,
to not have watched it." And so I
yeah,
watched it, and I was like, "That is the greatest movie I've ever seen." Um,
yeah,
and fell in love with them ever since. So
yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah, they're great. Well, cool, man. Well, here are the 5 questions I have for you. The first one is, what 5 films have you most recently seen?
All right. Well, this list I'm going to be referring to my list because I don't have any of these physically because they're all movies I've been streaming because I've been streaming movies like crazy to catch up on stuff. So some of these are just random ones that I've just watched, and other ones are ones that I've gone back and watched just because I never watched them over the years. So the first one would be The Mummy, the Brendan Fraser one. I watched a number of Brendan Fraser movies growing up. The one I remember the most would be George the Jungle, probably, but I never watched a lot of his movies, and so The Mummy is probably, I'd say, one of his most iconic films. So that was one I always meant to go back and watch. And then with the recent renaissance that seems to be happening right now with him working on that No Sudden Move movie, which is probably one of my favorites of the year. It's a really good one. I checked that one out on HBO Max. And then I think they just announced he's doing like a Martin Scorsese
Ah,
movie and a couple of other ones with like big directors and really good cast. I'm like, man, I can't wait to see what he does with that stuff. But so I went and watched The Mummy and I loved it. That's definitely one. That's definitely one I want to pick up. I don't know if have you seen all 3 of those?
no, I think just the first.
Just the first one because I've heard the second one's okay and the third one's fairly bad. So I'm not sure if I feel inclined to check the second and third one out based off of that. But I feel like I might just for the very least Brendan Fraser's charisma kind of thing,
Yeah.
just because he's a fun guy to watch do his thing. So the Mummy is definitely one that I really enjoyed. So anyone else who's in my position and hasn't seen the Mummy before, I definitely recommend that one. The next one's kind of I don't know. I guess it's a little more obscure. It's called Attack the Block, and it's one I heard about through a movie podcast that I listened to. And this one guy he's always talking about this movie, and I think they just announced a sequel to it also. But it's a really basic and simple premise. Essentially, it takes place in England, somewhere in England, in the city, and it's about these kind of like gangster teenager kids, and they're out one night like harassing people and stuff like that, and this like meteor crashes from space, and it's this alien, so they like chase it down and kill it, and then all of a sudden, all these other aliens start coming down and chasing after them, and so the movie basically just follows them on that night of all these aliens chasing after him. And obviously it takes place in a world where people didn't know aliens existed. So it's, the whole alien invasion type thing, but it's really cool because it's kind of on a small scale. it's from a more like unique perspective of just like a bunch of teenagers and stuff like that. And it's one of the most, I guess, like high adrenaline, like fast paced movies that I've watched in a while.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really cool. I mean, there's nothing absolutely spectacular. Like I said, it's a very basic premise, just kind of like this fun little action movie that kind of like fits into its own niche. But I had a really good time with it. It was fun.
That's cool.
Yeah. Next would be one that's within a genre that's probably your least favorite, is a horror movie. I've been going through and watching a bunch of horror classics over the past year, and I think I'm going to do a video on it in October, because I always try to do kind of like a from like a, still from like a Christian perspective, but a whole kind of horror theme, just because I feel like most Christians write off horror without even thinking about it. But one of the last classics I needed to check out was the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And so I watched the first two movies in that series, the most recent one being Nightmare on Elm Street 2. And I wanted to check it out because I've heard the first one and the third one are pretty good. So I was like, well, I got to watch the second one to kind of know what happens in between, at least. So the second one definitely wasn't nearly as good as the first one, but I still enjoyed it. But I really like the concept of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I don't know if you're familiar with it at all, but I think it's really interesting.
I'm familiar with the concept and the lead character,
Mm-hmm.
and I've
Yeah.
probably seen a couple of clips, but that'd be about it. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like the whole idea of like Freddy Krueger can only get you while you're sleeping, kind of thing. So like if you fall asleep, you're in danger, but if you're awake, you're fine. So the whole thing is them trying to stay awake, because if they fall asleep, he's going to hunt them down, kind of thing. So I think it's a really interesting concept. And there's like kind of like with any even slasher basic horror movie kind of thing of those veins. I think there's still cool stuff there. I mean, the practical effects are pretty neat with it as far as that stuff goes. They do some cool stuff with that, and I really appreciate that kind of stuff. So I had fun with it, but I'm looking forward to checking out the third one, because I've heard the third one's pretty cool too. The next one's a really recent movie I watched. I watched the new Suicide Squad movie.
Oh, did you?
The new James Gunn one. Yeah. So again, I have HBO, so I feel like because I have HBO, even though I love going to the theater, it's like, well, I'm paying for this service. I can't go see all the new movies in the theaters when I'm already paying for this service. That doesn't make sense financially. So I did end up watching the Suicide Squad at home, and I thought it was really great. I really liked it a lot. I'm someone who I liked the first Suicide Squad movie as much hate as that movie gets. I know it's probably popular to say this is an unpopular opinion, but I like the first one. But I feel like a lot of people say that. Like, I understand that the first one has its problems, specifically when it comes to like the editing and kind of the bad deal that the studio gave David Ayer, the director, when they basically re-edited the movie without him. So I understand that, but I still have a fun time with the first movie. My wife really likes the first movie a lot, and I thought when I showed it to her, she wouldn't like it at all, but she ended up loving it and thought it was really great. She even still liked it over this new one, but she's not into movies a ton, so she has these weird, like, all over the place unpopular opinions about movies. But I had a lot of fun with the new one. It's really good. There's a lot of good action. It's got a kind of like 80s war vibe, the action does to it. So it's really neat the way that's kind of stylized and stuff. The weakest element of the movie would probably be its story. It's fairly like basic and a little bit just jarring or convoluted, I guess. It's not necessarily bad. It's just the weakest element of the movie, probably. But it's a really fun one if you're just looking to go in and watch these, like, whimsical, wild characters have a good time, a bunch of action. You'll love it.
I am really interested to see it, because I like you, I enjoyed the first one. I didn't find the villain. Honestly, it was more the third act of that movie that I wasn't into. The first two, I was totally into it.
Because they went down the whole Skybeam route.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it. I didn't like. See, I think so. Jared Leto, I wasn't a fan of that Joker in that movie, but I've only seen the clip of the Justice League re-edit. If that Joker was in there, I think that would have been fascinating. I would have loved that.
Yeah, because he was really good in the Justice League one.
So good. Yeah, so I would have been a fan of that, but I am looking forward to seeing this Suicide Squad. And I'm a huge Stallone fan, so to have him as the shark.
Yeah. Oh man, Stallone as King Shark is so funny. All the stuff I'm seeing on YouTube is people like, I want to see clips of Stallone in the studio, like recording this, or seeing if he did any mocap for it or something like that.
That'd be pretty funny.
Just to see Sylvester Stallone in a mocap suit would be so funny.
That's awesome.
And then the most recent one I watched this just a few days ago. It's called First Love, and it's a foreign film, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing the director's name right, but it's Tadashi Miike or whatever. He's like an auteur foreign director. He's directed like 100 movies or something like that. Like he's one of those directors that's made like the most movies of all time. And so this is like kind of like an action thriller that he made, I think in like 2015 or 16. So it's just a few years old. And I thought the movie was good. It was, I mean, when you make 100 movies, I feel like all your movies can't be a hit. Mm-hmm. But I got introduced to him through the movie 13 Assassins, which is probably like the best movie of his, in my opinion. And I loved that one. So I wanted to check out some of his other films too. And this one was on Amazon Prime, so I checked it out. But it's kind of the premise of this guy who's kind of an up-and-coming, underrated boxer, and then this girl who is a call girl who's kind of mixed up with whatever like the equivalent of the mafia is in Tokyo and stuff like that. I forget the name of it. But like kind of mixed up with gangs and stuff like that and whatnot. And so their paths kind of randomly cross one night. And he just kind of like knocks out this one guy who's chasing her, and then they're kind of running together for the rest of the night. So it's kind of like a simple action movie / like, you know, falling in love story kind of thing. But it basically like follows them through the events of like that day kind of thing. So it was a fun action movie. It's got good action and stuff like that. The movie has too long of a beginning and too long of an end, but overall I still enjoyed it. The beginning and the end is kind of dragged out, and it's like, okay, are we gonna end this movie anytime soon? It's just like it's kind of like Lord of the Rings except bad, where like it just keeps having more and more endings. You're like, come on.
That's cool. We'll have to check that out. I wasn't aware of that director, so
yeah, I would definitely recommend 13 Assassins of his. It's a really good one. I think 13 Assassins is based off of a true story too, but it has to do with like a corrupt king who basically just like kills all of his, or I guess not king, like ruler, whatever like the ancient Chinese equivalent would be. But he basically like just starts killing off people just for fun and stuff like that. And he's just a horrible, like wretched guy. And so a bunch of people who were formerly samurai and stuff like that, they band together to basically overthrow him and take back the kingdom kind of thing. So they go by like the 13 Assassins. So it's the journey kind of them banding together, coming up with a plan to overthrow him and stuff. So it's really good. I really like that one.
Cool. I'll have to check that one out. The list is growing.
Yeah. You got like 7 movies off of that 5.
So what 5 films do you have your earliest memories from?
All right. The first one would be The Incredibles. I don't have that one in my collection yet. That's been one of the ones on the top of my list, but Disney movies are so expensive and so hard to get at a good price. I just haven't pulled the trigger on it yet. So I got to get it from like a used store or something like that, because you can usually get a pretty good deal on those. But The Incredibles was one of the first movies I remember watching. We went to the theater to go see it as a family, and still to this day is probably one of my parents' favorite movies. They both have Incredibles shirts. And when we went to my wife and I took them to go see The Incredibles 2 when that came out a few years ago, and they both wore their Incredibles shirts.
No way.
We
That's
went to
awesome.
go see it together. So yeah, they always kind of have the joke of them being Mr. and Mrs. Incredible and stuff. So that was one that's kind of always been a family favorite of ours growing up. And I still remember seeing that one in the theater for the first time and watching that one, you know, all the time growing up together as a family. That was because my dad's not a huge animated movie person, but his 2 favorites were The Incredibles and Monsters, Inc. So we watched those like on repeat all the time growing up. Yeah.
As a dad with a small child, I can say that these animated films get old very, very quickly. Yeah. So when you do find 1 or 2 that you're like, I love that one, it's like an oasis. I'm like, yeah, put that one on. Let's do that. So
especially when it comes to Pixar stuff, because Pixar is equally for kids as it's equally for adults, just
Yeah.
because there's so much to them. Even all the way back to Toy Story and Finding Nemo and
Yep.
Monsters Inc. Like all of their movies, I would say, are equally for adults and for children. But speaking of Monsters Inc., we were actually flying like a month ago for a trip, and on our way back, a kid a few rows in front of me was watching Monsters Inc. on one of the seat screens,
Yeah.
and so I was watching along, and I was like, gosh, I think I have this movie memorized. Like, I think I know every line to this movie, because
That's
I'm like
hilarious.
watching it. I'm like, I know exactly what's being said. I know exactly what's coming up. I was like, man, I think I have this movie memorized.
That's good.
Yeah.
Very cool.
All right. I think from here on out, I own all of these movies I'm about to talk about. So another one I remember seeing for the first time in the theaters was The Polar Express,
Mm-hmm.
the animated Tom Hanks one, where I think Tom Hanks plays about like every character in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember this was, I think, the first movie I saw in the theaters in 3D. I still remember we were in the theaters, and I remember the scene. I think the first time they stopped the train, and the front of the train like comes right up in your face. And so in 3D, that was like mind blowing for me as a kid. And I still remember one of my younger sisters like hated the 3D stuff, so she took the glasses off for the whole movie and watched the movie like blurry, just because the 3D scared her so much. But I still really like The Polar Express. I feel like today it's one of those movies, like a lot of people talk about it and you either love it or you hate it. I feel like it's one you either have nostalgia for or it just does nothing for you. But I grew up watching it all the time, so it has a special place in my heart, and I still really like it. I think it's a cool premise. It's fun to follow the kids on the train, and you got the music with like the hot chocolate song and stuff like that. So it's one I still really enjoy going back and watching every year for Christmas.
Cool. My brother is a huge fan of that one, and I can't get into it. And which is a shame, because I love Christmas so much. I have a massive Christmas collection.
Mm-hmm.
So I love Tom Hanks. So I should love everything about it, but I struggle with it. But my brother's a huge fan.
When were you introduced to it? Was it like when the movie first came out, or you just kind of checked it out randomly?
Yeah, like I watched it for the first time maybe 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I was way late to that party.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was, because I should love it.
I feel like that's usually the deciding factor, is do you have nostalgia for it or not? Because it seems like anyone who doesn't have nostalgia for it, whether they watched it growing up or watched it when it first came out, seems to really like it, and everyone else is like, it's okay.
It's one of those films I desperately want to be into, so like I almost force it on myself.
Because it's literally all about the spirit of Christmas and stuff like that. So
I'll try it again this year.
Well, if you haven't seen another Christmas movie that's probably one of the most recent classics, I think I talked about it in one of my Christmas videos for last year, is Klaus. I don't remember if you remember me talking about that one, the Netflix original. Yeah, that one, I wish we could get a physical release for it, because I loved it that much. But it's a Netflix movie, and Netflix rarely does physical releases. So that's another one of my Christmas favorites. But next, for another movie of my earliest memory, I have the whole trilogy for the original X-Men movies, but I would say all three of these, because this is similar to kind of how I was introduced to Lord of the Rings. I was introduced through my dad, and so we borrowed them from our neighbor down the street. And we watched the first one, and then I was always so excited to check out 2 and 3 for the first time, because we didn't get into these ones when they came out in theaters. It was when they were on like home release on DVD. So I still remember my neighbor down the street had all of them, because he was really into movies. So randomly, my dad would just be like, all right, we're going to watch the second one tonight for like the first time. So he'd have me bike down the street to our neighbor's house to go pick it up. So I'm pedaling as fast as I can to go down and get it and come back. And so I have really good memories of all three of those X-Men movies, just because my dad and I watched them for the first time together. So those are ones that I still really enjoy. I like most of the X-Men movies, but the original 3 definitely have a special place in my heart.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. Next, my favorite animated movie of all time, Disney's Tarzan. I have all the nostalgia for this one. This is another one that I can definitely tell you I have probably most of that movie memorized, but that's one of my favorites. That's on my top 10 favorites of all time. That one will definitely never leave the list. We talked about movies on the top 10 list changing. That definitely will never change. So Do you watch a lot of the Tarzan like Renaissance, or not Tarzan, like the Disney Renaissance 90s animated movies and stuff?
You know, for me, I was a little bit late to that.
Hmm.
But I do love those classics. So like, I actually think of you,
Yeah.
I found that one in a pawn shop before, and I found the soundtrack in a Salvation Army. And both times I thought of you. I was like, oh man, I also would love
Yeah.
these. Um,
Yeah.
so there's some of them that are in my universe, and then some of them that aren't. Tarzan would be one that I think I saw when it came out, maybe, but
Hmm.
wouldn't have been one that I revisited afterwards.
Yeah. 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 Well, I watched the VHS of that one all the time growing up. I even asked my mom like 3 or 4 years ago, I was like, hey, do you still have the VHS for Tarzan? Because that'd be a cool one since it's one of my favorites to, to split out the collection. She was like, I don't think so. I think I donated all those because we had like all the,
Okay.
Disney VHSs growing up and stuff like that. But I don't know why Tarzan just connected with me so much. And it's definitely a movie I watched all the time growing up. And you talked about the soundtrack. I had the Phil Collins soundtrack CD.
Yeah.
I listen to that all the time. I still go and listen to it all the time on Spotify and stuff like that. I'll be driving home from work at 1 o'clock in the morning and pop on my Phil Collins Tarzan soundtrack. Be jamming out to that on the way home. But yeah, I love the story of Tarzan. I think it's really cool. And one of my stacks in a little while, I'm going to talk about a different Tarzan movie too, so I won't talk about it now.
Okay.
But I love the Tarzan stuff, and I never watched any of the old. I think there's like a bunch of '60s Tarzan stuff,
Yeah.
but I never watched any of that stuff. But the animated one just always had a special place in my heart. I used to do like some drawing when I was younger, so I'd draw his character all the time. I always had fun with Turk and Tantor and all that kind of stuff. The other characters, I always thought it was fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right, and then last pick is another '90s one, Small Soldiers. I don't know.
I haven't
This one's
seen it.
kind of like a. This one's kind of like a. This one '90s one that was kind of like under the radar, like not a. It wasn't like hugely popular, but what made it kind of significant was it was the director of Gremlins, so it was the same guy who did that. So obviously, a lot of people have seen Gremlins, but I really like Small Soldiers. The way I kind of market it to people is I say it's kind of like Toy Story for teenagers.
Okay.
Because it has, so basically the premise is this big toy company is like the biggest one in the country or whatever, and they're like, we need to make toys cool, kids love action and violence and all this kind of stuff. So they're like, in the commercials, the toys are moving around and punching each other and all this stuff, so they're like, let's make them do that in real life. So they're trying to do that, and they get this military chip that they put in the toys that basically gives them an artificial intelligence and brings them to life. And so because some of them are soldiers and some of them are monsters, they follow their programming to like attack each other and stuff like that. So this one boy like buys some of them, and then they start fighting each other, and he gets like caught up in the middle of this like war kind of thing, battle that they have between them. So it's just like, it's really fun. It's got a lot of like cool practical stunts and whatnot. Like some of the special effects don't hold up because, it was the '90s. We were kind of figuring out special effects and whatnot for the time. But I think it's a really fun one. Like I said, it's kind of like Toy Story for teenagers. So a little bit more of like a grown-up version. You kind of, you get the action, you get some rude humor and poop jokes and all that kind of stuff. It's fun. So I have a good time with it. It just came out on Blu-ray last year. This is one I'm not a huge person who like has a bunch of DVDs that are like, oh, I wish all these were on Blu-ray, but that was one I had the DVD for a while that I was like, I'd love for that to come to Blu-ray, and it did last year. So that was a day one pickup for me, and because it was only like $12 too.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So that was a fun one. And I had fun with that growing up. That was another one I almost put on the list of earliest memories watching, because I still remember when I was like 10 or 12 years old. My family we had like a bunch of friends over and they were watching it, and I still remember vividly like the last action scene of the movie.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love those early memories of films. And then when you have I love listening to you talk about all of these experiences with films that you have with your dad.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are memories you get to have with your whole life, and then anytime you see that on the screen, everything just comes rushing back. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's funny how even just like specific like shots or scenes will stick with you, not even necessarily like a whole movie. I only vividly remember the last action scene of that Small Soldiers movie, but I couldn't tell you what the rest of the movie was, but I remember that for some reason. It just sticks out in my mind.
Very awesome. Well, what five films have had the greatest impact on you? And this is a pretty open-ended question. It could be emotionally, your worldview, life
Hmm.
perspective, being in someone else's shoes. So, or any or none of those things. So, but just
Hmm.
five films that you would say probably biggest impact on my life.
Yeah, I tried to go with a good variety for that of, like you said, like either impact on me from like a filmmaking interest standpoint or a personal, worldview kind of thing. Um, The first one let's get the easy one out of the way, obviously, is my Lord of the Rings. This is the one spot I picked to put Lord of the Rings. I had it in
Okay.
one or two other sections of like earliest memories because that was another early memory, but I was like, all right, we both love Lord of the Rings. I can't just talk about Lord of the Rings for the whole video.
We could have done five
So
Lord of the Rings questions, but
yeah, we could have just done five Lord of the Rings questions and talked about that for an hour. But yeah, Lord of the Rings obviously is a huge impact on both my interest in filmmaking when it comes to. I mean, I'm not some. I love filmmaking, but I don't love it in a way of like I want to make movies one day kind of thing. I just have a deep appreciation and passion for it, and I just find it all really interesting. So, Lord of the Rings was one of the first movies for that for me, and I think it was partially because of like all the bonus features that come with this set and DVDs and all that kind of stuff. Just because there's some of the most like in-depth behind the scenes features that like ever came out with any movies of there's like 30 hours of bonus features for these, and you get so much look behind the scenes of the bigatures, the special effects that were like I feel like still impressive to this day that
yeah.
hold up really well and stuff, and just all the work and the passion that went into it and that kind of thing. So that's had a huge impact on me, just interest in filmmaking wise, and then spiritually as well, just because, like I said, I haven't been with the Lord of the Rings books quite as long, but I do have a number of like devotionals that kind of coincide with the movies and the stories of the books and stuff like that. So it's just had a huge influence on me as far as kind of the foundations of my faith, because I got really into these movies when I was like in high school, a lot like middle school and high school. So, those are very, very influential times when it comes to, figuring out who you are and stuff. And so the kind of the different themes when it came to spirituality and just general outlook on life was definitely hugely influential for my life when it comes to those movies. And that's part of the reason they're my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah. I started reading, I found it, I was thrifting with my mother-in-law and I found a
Hmm.
biography on Tolkien. And it's really interesting to see his, like how he grew up and his
Hmm.
journey and his faith journey and his experience in the military. And then to see all of
Hmm.
these things in his writing and to see how
Yeah.
all of that impacted The Lord of the Rings. It's pretty amazing to
Yeah.
see. Yeah. And then
Hmm.
his
Yeah.
friendship with
Yeah.
C.S. Lewis and the back and forth that those
Right.
two had, like it's
Hmm.
really rich and deep. The
Yeah.
writings
Yeah.
for
Because he
yeah,
was, I think, an atheist before C.S. Lewis introduced him to Christianity, if I remember right. Or he at
yeah,
least wasn't a Christian.
yeah. They had I can't remember the name, but they had a group, the Inklings, I think it was,
Yeah.
and
Something like that.
they would meet and go over each other's writings, and
Hmm.
which is
Just talk about stuff.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
you can still go to that tavern today, and to know that these
Yeah.
guys were sitting there smoking pipes, having a drink,
Yeah.
and talking some of the
Yeah.
most influential works that we'll
Oh,
ever
yeah.
know. It's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Anyway, Lord of the Rings. I'm glad you have it in here. I knew it was going to be on
Yeah.
your one of your lists.
Yeah. It's coming at some point. My next pick is going to be the first Alien movie.
Cool.
I have a huge love for the Alien franchise, and which is funny because I refuse to watch some of the movies because I've heard they're so bad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've heard the third one and the fourth one are pretty bad. So I'm someone who, when I have a huge love for something, I don't want that to be tarnished. So I haven't gone to watch the third and fourth films in this franchise just because I don't want my huge love for the franchise to be tarnished. But the funny thing with the first Alien movie is I think I checked it out kind of on my own because I had a local public library that had a huge DVD and I think even Blu-ray collection when I was growing up. So I would go there multiple times a week just to check out movies. It was kind of like my Blockbuster, except it was free
Yeah.
because you got the library card and you get whatever you want. So I still remember I'm the old woman at the library. She was really into movies too. So every time I'd come in, she and I were talking about movies here and there, and I'd be checking out. She's like, "Oh, this is a really good one. This is a really good one," and stuff.
That's
So
cool.
I rented this movie by myself without any like recommendation off of anyone. And I actually watched maybe the first like 5 minutes or something. And this was before I was really into movies. I just enjoyed watching them. So I got them all the time. And so I watched the first like 5 or so minutes and was kind of bored with it. So I turned it off and watched something different. I must have just been in the wrong mindset or in the mood for something that was more like action packed or something. So I only watched like the first 5 minutes in the movie. And then like years later, I was working at a restaurant and someone recommended the Alien movies to me. And I was like, oh yeah, I watched the first one time, but I thought it was kind of boring. So I turned it off. And he was like, oh no, you got to go watch it. It's so good. So I went back, got it again, watched it. And ever since then, I've loved the first two Alien movies, and I really like a lot of the others too. I've jumped around the franchise because, like I said, I haven't watched all of the movies in it, but I like a lot of the newer ones too, and like the crossover with the Alien and the Predator and stuff like that. So yeah, so the Alien franchise is definitely one that's had a big influence on me as far as my interest in like the science fiction genre, and I think it's really cool that the movies kind of genre hop a little bit too, where like the first one's kind of like sci-fi horror, second one's like sci-fi action, and then Alien Covenant and Prometheus and stuff, they kind of play around with those genres as well. So that's always fascinated me, and I really like kind of the lore and stuff like that that goes along with the Alien movies. So a lot of people pick Aliens as their favorite in the franchise, but I always, even though the first time I watched it I turned it off because I was bored, I still have a special place for the first one specifically for me.
Nice. I bought Hot Rod, or I watched Hot Rod. Have you ever seen that movie?
Yeah, I
So
remember that one. I haven't seen it for a long time, but I've seen it.
So I rented it from Blockbuster when it was there, and I watched maybe 10, 15 minutes in it. I thought it was the dumbest thing that was ever put to film, and I shut it off. And then the next day I had nothing to do, and I didn't have a vehicle. My wife needed the vehicle. I had nowhere to go. So I was like, well, I paid for it. I may as well as watch it. So I threw it in, watched it, and then went out to FYE and bought it that night. And I thought it was the greatest. So you're right. It might just be the moment you're in that you're like, it doesn't connect with you. And now I think it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But
yeah, that's the one. I haven't seen that since I was like a teenager. That's the one where there's like the running joke throughout the movie of like punching a certain way that makes you like poop your pants or something, right? That's the one. That's like the big thing I remember from the movie is he wants this like old guy to teach him how to punch someone a certain way to make them poop their pants.
Yeah, man, it's the stupidest thing. The premise is so dumb.
Yeah,
but I laughed so hard during it.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta go back and watch that one because I think I remember you talking about it in one of your videos, and I was like, oh, I gotta check this one out.
Oh, that's funny, man.
All right, next pick. Another one that was another early memory. I have a lot of movies that are my early memory, but the original, even specifically the first Spider-Man movie. The second one is probably my favorite of this trilogy, but Tobey Maguire is my Spider-Man, and he always will be. So I love these. These are some of the first. These and the original X-Men movies, some of the first superhero movies I remember watching. So I have a lot of love for both of these franchises. Specifically Spider-Man 2, I would say, because, well, I guess technically the first two Spider-Mans, because the first Spider-Man was the first PG-13 movie I was allowed to watch. So I still remember watching it in our living room with both my parents one night. And then the second Spider-Man movie was the first movie my grandfather took me to go see in the movies. He took me for my birthday when it came out. And I still remember all the Spider-Man movies always came out around my birthday because he took me to see the second one in the theater for my birthday. And then for the third one, I went to go see with a bunch of my friends for my birthday. So those always have a pretty prominent memory, pretty good memories and stuff like that for me. And I love, like, I've never watched any of like Sam Raimi's like old like horror movies and stuff like that, but I love how much he utilizes like practical effects and how I think they called it like the spider cam was like a camera that they wired up to like swing throughout the city and stuff for all of their like special effects shots and stuff. But you could just tell they put so much work into like making it look believable and stuff like that. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like this is the most like grounded of the Spider-Man movies. Like obviously in the Andrew Garfield ones, you know, they had the actual web shooters and stuff, which was a little more grounded than, you know, he just produces this random web and stuff.
Sure.
But I've always had this special place for these ones just because they always felt so realistic. And it was just like, I didn't read Spider-Man comics growing up, but he was my favorite superhero. My mom is probably still at my parents' house of this Spider-Man encyclopedia. So it was like the guide to every villain and all the old comics and stuff. So I never read the comics, but I knew a lot about the comics and stuff just because of this encyclopedia of Spider-Man that I read all the time. And I felt like this version of the films was like the most accurate adaptation of like the classic Spider-Man comics and stuff. And even though, you know, the high schoolers look like they're 25 years old and stuff like that in the movie, it's like, well, that was the time period, so, you know, it is what it is. But I love the like themes that each of the Spider-Man movies focused on. Of like, I felt like the first one was like such a good interpretation of great power and great responsibility. And then when it comes to like forgiveness and having a choice and all that kind of stuff, I just love the themes of these ones. Like I anytime I see like a reaction on YouTube of like watching the Raimi trilogy for the first time, I always check it out just because I love seeing people's reaction to seeing it for the first time. So that's definitely one that one day when I have kids, I can't wait to show them, just because I have such a fondness for all of those movies.
They're great. Yeah, I'm a fan for sure.
Yeah. My next pick for impact would be one I've recommended to you a number of times. I think is the Ragamuffin movie for Rich Mullins' life story. And the reason I picked this one is partially because I think it's, like I've said, one of the greatest Christian movies, which is a bold statement, considering there's not a lot of good Christian movies out there. But the other reason I picked it is because it was hugely impactful on the channel when I started the YouTube channel. I think it was a second or third movie I talked about on the channel. So it was one of my earliest videos. And I don't know if I ever talked about it on the channel, but when I made that video, I think like a day or two later, it had, in my mind, gone viral because it had like 100 views. And I was like, I just started this channel. How did a video of mine get 100 views? But then, so I woke up like a day or two after the video was posted where I talked about the movie, because I basically talked about it. I don't know if you ever went back and watched the video, but I kind of talked about what I don't like about Christian movies and why I think this one's different, because it's a very powerful story about a really cool guy. So I woke up the next morning and the video had like 100 views, and I had a Facebook message in my inbox from my Facebook page, or from my Facebook page that I'd started for the channel, because I wanted kind of a social media channel to promote the stuff to friends and whatnot, because, you know, when you're new to everything, you're just trying to figure it all out. Sure. But I had a Facebook message from this guy, and he was actually a friend of Rich Mullins when Rich Mullins was alive back in the 90s. And he's also friends with the guy who directed this movie. And he said, he said, obviously he loves the movie and he really enjoyed my video. And he said he actually sent it to the guy who directed the movie. And said that he really like thoroughly appreciated all the nice things I had to say about the movie. And I was like, wow, little old me just put together this YouTube video talking about this movie. And it just so happens that the guy who directed it happened to see this video out of nowhere. And then like the company that had produced the film, they were like passing the video around the company. So like, that's why it had so many views, is a bunch of people who were a part of the organization that had like put the movie together, as well as, I forget the name of the organization, but the organization that has to do with Brendan Manning and Rich Mullins and stuff. And kind of like, you know, their outlook at life of being a ragamuffin and stuff like that. So I forget the name of it because I haven't looked at it for a while, but I was just mind blown that that video just happened to come across them, and they were so appreciative of what I had to say about the movie. So that's definitely a reason why that's one of my favorites, for both kind of the impact that it had on me from that point of view, as well as the fact that I just think it's a really good story too.
Yeah. I haven't seen that one yet. A friend of mine just gave me last week 3 albums of his music, which I've also never listened to. But I do have them now, so check it out. So
yeah, he's probably my dad's favorite musician. So as you probably tell, I'm hugely influenced by my dad and what he's into. So he played Rich Mullins all the time growing up and still does. So I love listening to his music. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's definitely one. And then my last pick for influential or a big impact on me would be The Farewell, which I think you talked about not too long ago on your channel. This is one I checked out last year, I think, when it was on Amazon Prime, and I finally just bought it. I don't even know if I put it in a haul video yet for my own channel, but I was hesitant to pick it up because the movie had such a big impact on me. I didn't know if I would want to watch it again because it was a
Mm.
very emotional impact. But I was like, well, if it had that much of an impact on me, I feel like I need to own it because at some point it's going to be something I'm going to want to revisit. But the reason it had a huge impact on me is kind of the premise of the story being that of someone's grandmother who was, sick and passing and kind of slowly passing away, but like the secret of the family. And I couldn't relate necessarily on the level of keeping a secret from a grandparent or something like that. But it just hit me so hard when I watched it because it was just a few months after my grandmother had passed away, who I was really
Mm.
close with growing up. And yeah, we were just really close. And this was the first movie in a long time that like literally had me like bawling at
Wow.
the end of the movie, just because even though the movie story itself didn't play out in a similar way at all really to what happened, it was just the fact that the themes of the movie revolved around someone losing a grandparent and like what that means and stuff and how it impacts them. So it was all like the perfect storm
Yeah.
and how it impacted me. So I mean, it's a great movie in itself, but especially the time of life that I was in and what was happening, it just had a huge impact on me emotionally. And I'm glad this movie has a happier ending than it did when my grandmother passed away. But I know she's up in heaven. But she's someone who I was really close with growing up, and she got cancer and within like a month had passed away. Just
Oh,
like it just
wow.
took her like that. It was so fast. So it was, and like I said, I watched this just a few months after, not necessarily knowing the premise of the movie. Like I'd remembered seeing a couple of trailers, but I had heard great things about it. So I was like, oh, I'll check it out. And then by the end of the movie, I'm just like in tears,
Wow.
just because of how much it impacted me and kind of related to what I was feeling and stuff. So it was definitely probably, like I said, one of the movies that I was most emotional watching recently, or at least I have the memories of that most, but just because, it just touched me in that kind of way. And I haven't had a movie touch me in that kind of way in a long time.
Wow. It is such a
Yeah.
deeply human movie. Like,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I just was floored by it. I'm also really close with my grandmother. She just turned 97, and she,
Yeah.
uh, but she has her health struggles, and it's,
Hmm.
and we're very close. I lived with her when I was doing security between high school and
Yeah.
college. She was picking me up from doing the midnight shifts and driving me back, and would stay at her
Hmm.
place for summer.
Yeah.
Very close. So watching that film, it was emotional for me too. And I would say, I think that was the first thing I've ever seen Aquafina in. And
Yeah. It was one of the first movies I saw her in too.
I thought she was so amazing. I loved her in that
Yeah.
role. Yeah.
Yeah. She has really good range. Like she does great stuff in this, but drama wise, but she has really good comedy. Like
Oh
she's really
yeah.
funny in the new Raya the Last Dragon movie. And then, was it the Crazy Rich Asians? Like she's
Yeah.
really funny in that one too. So
She's incredible.
yeah. Yeah. This is one that I'd love to like show like my parents or something like that, or at least my mom, but it was her mom that passed away. So I think it'd be
Oh
too
yeah.
much for her.
Yeah.
So like, as much as it's a great story and it was in a way healing for me to watch this, it was just a part of my healing process. I think it'd still be too hard for her to watch it.
Yeah. And there's a lot to discuss in that film, like on
Oh yeah.
morality. Not that there's well, yeah. I mean, depending on your cultural perspective, what
Yeah.
happened was right or wrong. Um,
Hmm.
there was a lot to discuss. It was so
Yeah.
beautifully done, and I thought the casting
Hmm.
was perfect. And yeah,
Yeah.
outstanding.
Yeah. And I like how it's a good blend of English as well as the native language that the people speak and stuff. Because I'm someone who I have no problem watching a movie in subtitles and stuff, but I think this would be a good kind of like entry level movie for
Yeah.
someone to introduce them to a foreign film. Because I don't know if it necessarily is like categorized as a foreign film since it's released by A24. I'm not sure kind of how it's categorized, but I know I try to, because I've learned so much from foreign films. I try to recommend them to people who just don't like what reading subtitles and stuff, but I'm like, you're literally missing some of the best movies that have
Oh
ever been
yeah.
made by not watching movies with subtitles.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. For me, I didn't watch a ton until I started getting into Criterion. And then
Hmm.
there were just some
Yeah.
films that were so intensely highly recommended. And then I would
Hmm.
go, I guess everyone says I should.
Yeah.
And then I watched it
Yeah.
and it blew me away. And so I've continued to build
Hmm.
up a decent library of foreign
Yeah.
films. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good. All right, man. Well,
Yeah.
what 5 films do you consider to be underrated films?
All right. I have a quick honorable mention. This one was going to be on my list, but Mr. Nichols talked about it in his video with you. So I figured I'd still mention it because it was one you hadn't seen. That way you can get a double recommendation on it. And that is the Searching movie.
All right.
I believe this is one of the ones he mentioned underrated.
It is.
This one it's a really good movie. And I think it just, when it came out, just, wasn't hugely popular, kind of like with the mainstream audiences or something like that. But, I know he gave a pretty good synopsis of it when he was describing it. But the coolest thing about this movie is it's told completely through screens, whether it's like a screen recording of like an iPhone or a computer, or it's captured through like a GoPro camera and stuff. So everything that's captured in the movie is through some kind of webcam or selfie camera, that kind of thing. But it's really creative in that sense. But it's also really well thought out and structured too. I don't know if you watched, I think, what's the movie called that came out last year? Run, that came out last year. Okay. It's made by the same guys who did this. They did this first. So this was like an experiment. So they came up with a short film concept for this movie, and then the studio really liked it. So they said, yeah, let's make a feature film on it. So they did this one. But the one they came out with last year is more a traditional film. But this one's just so cool, at the very least, for lack of a better word, for like kind of the gimmick of a movie told through screens. Because there's a number of movies that have done that, but I think this is the best one that's done it. And it's really cool because it's kind of, I think he told you, it's like a mystery where you're trying to figure out where this guy's daughter went because she disappeared this one night. But if you pay extremely close attention to this movie, because it's through screen grabs and recordings and stuff like that of like news articles and stuff, they give you the answer to what happened if you're paying close enough attention when you're watching the movie, and you can figure it out before they reveal it at the end of the film. So it's really cool. It's a really cool experiment. And like I said, I think it's the best example of a movie that's told completely through like Skype and Zoom and FaceTime, all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's my honorable mention. I didn't mean to talk about it for as long as I did, but it's one that I'm always recommending to people because it kind of really flew under the radar. I think it came out in 2018. So it was one of those ones that like really flew under the radar that year. My next pick is one that I have a lot of guilty pleasure for, is the Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter movie. This is one that I like recommending to people, just because I personally, when it first came out, was like, well, that's stupid. Like, just seeing the title for it, it's like, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. Like, are you kidding me? And then like I think I got it from that library that I was talking about, and was just like, let me just check this out and see what it's all about. And I was like, that was actually pretty good. Like, I really enjoyed that. Like, for as ridiculous as the premise is, it, at least to my knowledge, follows the life of Abraham Lincoln's presidency fairly accurately, but somehow throws in vampires, and it works. So
I know I've seen you talk on your channel about it.
Yeah.
And
I think it was one of the ones in my first like underrated movie series videos or something like that. So.
And that is how I responded when I first saw you pull it. I was like, seriously? And but you talked about it very highly. Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing absolutely spectacular, but it surprised me when I watched it for the first time. So I was like, well, if it surprised me and I liked it as much as I did, I definitely got to recommend it to other people too. So yeah, like don't go in with crazy high expectations, but it's definitely an underrated fun one in my opinion.
Is anybody streaming that one, or is that only on physical?
I'm not sure. I owned the DVD for a long time, and then I upgraded to Blu-ray a year or two ago, so I'm not sure. I feel like it was streaming at one point on like Prime or something like that, but I don't remember. All right. I'm not sure if it's still streaming anywhere, but yeah, that's definitely a fun one. I still remember a few years ago, I introduced my brother to it for the first time, and he was of the same mindset. I said, don't worry, I know this sounds stupid, but you're going to like it. Because he and I have very similar film tastes. So I knew he was going to like it. I think he even went and picked it up not long after I showed it to him.
Cool.
But yeah, so that one's a good one. And the next one is the Speed Racer movie, which came out in 2008. It's made by the Wachowskis, who did the Matrix trilogy, which obviously that's what they're most known for. And they've had a lot of, I haven't seen all of their movies, but they've had a lot of hit and miss movies since the Matrix, even within the Matrix franchise. But this one is one that I remembered watching growing up. And then a friend of mine had it on Blu-ray, this one actually. And he said he had it because his dad wanted to watch it once, so they picked it up to watch together. And he just thought it was okay. And I was like, really, I've been looking for that movie. If you'll sell it to me, I'll take it. So he sold it to me, and I got it off of him. And I just watched it a few months ago for the first time since I was a kid, and I was like, that was really actually pretty good, because I remember
Cool.
when this came out, it was not necessarily like hated, but it didn't. I don't think people understood what the movie was. I think as far as its concept when it comes to like its effects and its style when it comes to the filmmaking that's into it, it was very ahead of its time because it's very like cartoony and whimsical, but it knows it is. It's not like incidentally that way. So it's really cool, and it's got like, you know, a good story to it. It's at its core, it's a movie about family and stuff like that. And I love anything that has like family themes and stuff, just because, you know, that's something that's important to me. So I enjoy it, and it's a fun movie too. So I definitely recommend that one to people. And that was, like I said, that's one that I recently reintroduced myself to. So it's one that I wanted to recommend to people.
Cool. I haven't seen that one yet.
Yeah. And then you may have seen this one. This one I've talked about on the channel too is Sahara with
Okay.
Matt McConaughey. I love this one. This is another one that we watched all the time growing up. This was a family regular viewing. We watched this at least once a year. But it kind of flopped when it first came out. But it's really cool because it's kind of like a combination of like an Indiana Jones, James Bond type thing, which is that I describe it that way because that's how it's described in the note down here from the reviewer who reviewed it. But it's really fun. I think it's based off of a Clive Cussler book, I think, because he writes a lot of like espionage and spy stuff and whatnot. But it's kind of like in the vein of, like I said, like an Indiana Jones, James Bond thing. It's a really cool mix of like adventure and all this stuff, because it's the premise of this disease is spreading throughout, I forget where, some country in Africa. And this guy and his friend just kind of happen along a WHO woman who's a doctor, and they're kind of working together to figure out what's causing this infection that's spreading throughout all these villages and stuff. So it's one of my favorite, like, just like fun movies to pop in and have a good time with. So I know it kind of flopped when it came out and people didn't like it for some reason, but I really enjoy it. And then next is No Escape, which I think you've mentioned before. You've seen that one. This is like I can't believe this one. I can't believe I have to put this on an underrated list, because Owen Wilson is so good in this movie. Of like, you would have never known he could do drama, like I would say drama, thriller, like action stuff before, because he's just so well known for his comedy. But he does such a good job, I think, of, you know, embodying like that of a father and stuff like that, and just being willing to do anything to protect your family in that, as crazy of a scenario as that is. It's crazy what happened in the story, but it's like, it's so cool that it's like, I still remember watching it for the first time and being like, that is one of the most intense movies I've seen in a long time. Like, when you start the movie off, it almost presents itself as like a family comedy drama. Like, if you go into this movie completely blind, you're thinking it's just going to be like, oh, it's just this family move into a foreign country, and, you know, it's going to be their whatever of learning to live in another country or whatever. But then, like, something happens, and from then on, it's just full on escalating action and drama and all this stuff, and it's so cool. I love that one.
I watched that one by myself years ago, and same thing as you. It is intense, so intense. And then I showed it to my wife. I bought it this year. I think this past year. I sat down with my wife and we watched it. After our little one goes down to sleep, we watched it. And I've seen it before, and I was still like so like, anxious. And my wife was just like eyes wide, like heart racing. And I won't ruin anything for anyone who hasn't seen it, but you know, that rooftop to rooftop scene.
Oh yeah.
I honestly feel like I'm going to be sick every time I see that scene. Like, it destroys me. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. And from that moment on, the movie does not let up. Like, there's no more than like maybe 30 seconds of relief before something else happens.
Oh, gosh.
Until the credits roll, it's intense.
Yeah, it's not one of those ones you should watch right before bedtime, because when you go to bed, you're like wired.
Your blood's going to be pumping. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely one of those movies that'll keep you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah. Well, that's a great list, man. That's a great list.
Yeah. And then, since I did have an honorable mention, so technically it was 6 in this one, but I said I was going to talk about Tarzan again.
Yeah.
So this is The Legend of Tarzan. Have you seen this one? No. So this one is really cool. So this came out, when did this one come out? It doesn't have the date on it, but it came out like 7 or 8 years ago, I think, or something
Okay.
like that. And it was directed by one of the guy who did a lot of the latter Harry Potter movies. So that was kind of
Okay.
like their big selling point of it, of marketing it, of the guy who did a lot of the Harry Potter movies. But obviously, I was really excited for it because I'm such a huge Tarzan fan. And then what I loved about this movie is it's not the same story as the Disney Tarzan movie. So it's not just
Okay.
necessarily another adaptation of that, but it's actually takes place of Tarzan after he decides to go with Jane back to England. And so it takes place of he's lived in England for a number of years now, and for circumstances he has to return back to where he lived when he lived in the jungle with the apes and stuff. And so what I loved about that, it was almost as if it was a sequel to the Disney Tarzan movie, because they refer back to the events that took place back when he was there.
Oh,
And
wow.
obviously it's not a sequel, but it refers to events that happened in the Disney Tarzan movie technically, because, you know, as an adaptation of the Tarzan book from, you know, the 50s or the 60s or something like that. But that's what I loved about it, is I was like, I grew up watching the Disney Tarzan movie, and now I'm an adult, and now there's like this adult version almost. I mean, it's PG-13, so it's not like graphic violence or anything,
Right.
but there's almost like this next, what seemed like a natural next step and a sequel to the Tarzan movie. So it was really cool to watch Tarzan as a kid and then watch The Legend of Tarzan growing after being grown up, and seeing him go back and almost in a, you know, without those rose tinted nostalgia goggles of seeing, you know, what it's like for him going back. And they refer to a couple of the characters that they would have had, you know, in the Disney movie and stuff like that growing up. So I love that. For me, it's a duology of the first Disney Tarzan and then The Legend of Tarzan. So the movie didn't do great when it came out, but I thought it was really good, partially because I have nostalgia for the Tarzan franchise.
Sure.
But I mean, the number of times I've recommended it to people, they've really enjoyed it. So that's one that I definitely recommend.
Nice. Cool. I haven't seen that one either. So,
Yeah, it's a good one, and it's got Margot Robbie in it, who plays like Harley Quinn and stuff
yeah.
like that. She plays Jane in it. Samuel Jackson's in it.
Really?
He plays like, yeah, like a guide kind of thing in it. So he's
I
really
need
good
to
in it.
check
Like
it out.
him, yeah, him and Alexander Skarsgård plays Tarzan. Him and Alexander have good chemistry on screen, and Margot Robbie does a good job as Jane too. And it's got what's his name, Christoph Waltz
Oh,
in it too.
really?
He plays like the villain in it, and I love Christoph Waltz
Oh,
in
yeah.
Inglorious Bastards and Django Unchained. Like
Yeah.
those are my favorite of his, and so he does a good job in this one too. I like it when he plays the villain.
He's amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to check that one out, man. I honestly, that one had never like been on my radar as a film, but I had no idea that was the
yeah,
cast either. So I'll
yeah,
definitely check
yeah.
it
It's
out.
got a good cast. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, and the last question, man. What 5 films bring you the most joy, hope, laughter? They put a smile on your face.
All right.
Yeah. What
I
5?
won't. I don't remember exactly. I basically took your question of joy, hope, laughter, and tried to pick one within each. So I
Oh,
don't remember
cool.
off the top of my head why I picked one for each one, but I'd say about half of these are comedies and half are kind of like the whole hope and joy type thing too.
Cool.
So the first two I'll show are the comedy ones. Is Hot Fuzz, one of my favorite movies of all time. I was
Mhm.
introduced to this one. I think it was on Netflix or something like that. So I watched it like 4 or 5 years ago and was like, how have I never seen this movie before? This is like literally one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. I think in my 31-day film challenge, I put this as like the funniest movie I had ever seen. And it's just hilarious. Like Edgar Wright does such a good job blending his comedy with his action and his drama. Like I feel like this movie is equally a comedy, action, and a drama. Like I feel like there's just perfect moments. Like everything about the movie is so well structured when it comes to setups and payoffs for jokes. Like almost every single line in this movie is either a setup or a payoff for a joke, but it's done so well and creatively that
Yeah.
it's not like a roll your eyes kind of joke or something. Everything that's meant to be funny in this movie is funny. And
Yes.
so it's one of my favorite movies to just put on and have a great time laughing at, enjoying the action, all the crazy over the top violence and stuff like that. Like I just have such a good time with, like, when the top of that church falls off on the one guy and
Oh,
just
yeah.
blows his whole body. I love it.
Those guys are a great comedy pair. So,
Yeah. Oh yeah, I love it. And I just watched what's it called? the last of the Cornetto trilogy, The World's End.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had not. That was the only one of the three I hadn't seen. I'd seen Shaun of the Dead a bunch, and I loved that one, and then Hot Fuzz. And so finally, like this past year, I checked out The World's End, and I thought that was really good too. It's definitely I like the first two of Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz best, but World's End is really good too.
Nice.
Yeah. And then next is probably one of my favorite comedies, and this is another one thanks to my dad, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I've never watched anything else Monty Python, but at one point in time, I probably have this movie memorized too, because my dad and I watched this one so much and quoted it so much growing up. It was this and Napoleon Dynamite for my dad when it was comedies. So I just think this is one of the funniest movies ever made. I love like all the sketches. Like every scene in itself is kind of a sketch, but then there's also this just overarching story where there's I don't know. I just think it's like a master class in humor and comedy. I really do.
It does. It's one of those films that has legend status. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I love that it plays into like the fact that it's so low budget and stuff like that. But I even heard a couple of years ago that they had originally planned on a final action scene for the movie, but they ran out of money, so they changed the ending to what it is in the film. Yeah, for the budget.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So I love that, and I love like the narrator gag where he keeps like narrating throughout and then gets his throat slashed towards the end of the movie and stuff. I think it's so funny.
It's definitely a legendary one.
Yeah. And then this is one that I also put on underrated, but it seems to have become having a more of a resurgence. So this is one of those ones that brings me joy, I would say, is a friend of mine introduced me to this 3 or 4 years ago, maybe. And maybe it was just 3 years ago. And since he's introduced me to it, I watch it at least once a year. It brings me that much joy. It's one of those movies that it puts me in such a good mood. And I don't know why. It's just because it's such like a charming story. And it's based off of, there's a lot of like 80s music in it, which even though I'm a 90s kid, I love my 80s music too, because I just feel like the 80s music is just so different from like any other generation, I feel like. And it's so distinct. So I love this. It's basically, this boy who meets this girl and immediately is infatuated with her and tells her that he's in a band, but he's not in a band. And so she's impressed and says she's a model. So she says, "Oh yeah, I'll be in one of your music videos." And so he goes back to his friend, is like, "We got to start a band." And so they start a band, and it's like their journey of, it's just a bunch of like misfit outcasts that start this band together, and it's their journey of like becoming friends, and then him and this girl falling in love. So it's just so like charming and so like innocent in a way, but it's also got like really good original music, really good music from the 80s, and it's just a really heartwarming story too. So my friend introduced me to this a few years ago, and since then I immediately went and bought it after he showed it to me. Since I'd never heard of it before, and I show it to as many people as I can, just because it's such a movie that makes me so happy to watch every time.
I'm hearing more and more people talk about that film, and Mr. Nichols mentioned it in his, and
Yeah.
I've never seen it. So I do need to watch it because everybody's talking about it.
Yeah. It seems like you either love it or you've never heard of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, but it also seems like it's having a bit of a resurgence within the film community of a lot of people talking about it lately. Because a lot of people in different videos and stuff, it seems like they'll either refer to it or show it or something like that. So it makes me happy every time I see someone mention it or something like that, because I think it's even got the Rotten Tomatoes certified fresh on there, which,
there you go.
Some people trust that, some people don't, but I just couldn't believe I had never heard of it before. I mean, granted, it's a movie that was made in 2016, so it's not like it was 10 or 20 years old, so it's fairly new. But I couldn't believe I'd never heard of it before, and I've loved it ever since. Like, it was immediately a movie I loved from the first time I watched it, and it's on my top 10 list of all time. So that's the fact that I had not seen the movie before, and in one viewing, it was one of my favorites of all time, says a lot about it, I think.
I need to see it. I just need to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it's streaming anywhere. So I think the only way to really see it is to buy it or maybe rent it digitally or something like that. So I know when I got it, I found it at like a Walmart on their website for like 10 or 12 bucks or something.
Okay,
so that's how I got it. Yeah.
All right. It's on my list.
All right. Next one. I don't think you've talked about this one before, but it's Jon Favreau's Chef. Have you seen this one before? This one's really cool. I'd heard a lot of good things about it for a long time, and then maybe a year or two ago, I finally checked it out because it was on. I think it was on IMDb TV, which you can watch through Prime Video, but you have to watch like movies with ads and stuff like that. So it's like a free streaming service, but it's also a collaboration with Prime Video. So I watched it on there, and loved it. So this is, I think, one of Jon Favreau's first movies. I don't remember. I think he made it after like Elf, but it was before.
Okay.
I think it was maybe right around the time he made. It says 2014. So yeah, so this was a little while after he made the first two Iron Man movies. So yeah, so it would have been after Elf because I think Elf was like 2003 or four. But this is one of his movies that I think flew under the radar a lot. But it's a really, really charming story about a father and his son. So basically, he's this like excellent chef, but he works at this place that just wants him to cook to the menu and won't let him kind of like branch out and play with flavors and all this kinds of stuff. Just if you're going to watch this movie, don't watch it hungry. It's going to make you very hungry. And so he quits his job at the restaurant and buys a food truck and just starts traveling around the country with his best friend and his son. And he's divorced. And so him and his son, they only see each other, a few times a week or something like that. But his ex-wife lets his son travel with him for the summer while he does his food truck thing. And so it's the journey of the three of them traveling around, having this food truck, and him reconnecting with his son, and of like, building that relationship that they never really had and stuff. So it's a really, really just like charming, heartwarming story and stuff like that. And like I said, it's going to make you want some really good food too. So definitely don't watch when it's hungry. It's some really good stuff with food in there too.
Just added it to my list.
All right. But yeah, that's one I had never seen before. And then after watching it, I was like, oh, I definitely need that one. So I think I got it off of Amazon or something like that.
I'll be checking it out.
It's one I've been meaning to show my wife because I think she'll really like it, but I watched it by myself when I checked it out. So I think she'd enjoy it a lot. And it's actually got a Robert Downey Jr. cameo in it.
Oh, really?
From Iron Man. Yeah. And Scarlett Johansson's in it too. So it's kind of funny. It's like the OG,
that is pretty funny.
like the OG Marvel cast, but they're all in it. So Scarlett Johansson plays like a friend of Jon Favreau's character that I think he's kind of like had a crush on, or she has a crush on him or something. And then Robert Downey Jr., he plays like a friend of his ex-wife's or something like that. And
okay.
I forget because I've only seen the movie once or twice, so I don't remember too much from it, but it's just funny that it's got like the OG Marvel people in it. And then, like I said, it's one of his movies that's definitely flown under the radar because, yeah, he wrote and directed it.
Okay, cool. I'll definitely check it out.
Because I mean, he's doing great stuff with like Star Wars and stuff like that. So I feel like anything Jon Favreau touches turns to gold. So, and then my last pick for movies that just bring me joy and stuff, it's got to be Little Women from 2020. I think the movie came out in 2019, but the Blu-ray must have come out in 2020. So I'm not really a like, romantic or period piece or rom-com kind of person. But I heard such good things about this, even within the film community and stuff when it came out, specifically through the movie podcast that I listened to, that I was like, I got to check this one out. And my wife watched all like the old Little Women stuff growing up. She watched like the 90s version. I think there was like a new Little Women movie every decade or something like that. And so she grew up watching them. And so she really wanted to see it. And I had heard good things about it. So I was like, and it was directed by Greta Gerwig, who did the Lady Bird movie. And I really liked Lady Bird. I thought that was a good one. So I wanted to check it out because I heard I liked her directing in that one too. So I checked it out and just like loved it. Absolutely loved it. I've seen the movie like 4 or 5 times now. And it's just a movie that's so well done when it comes to the filmmaking of it, but it's also like just the overall tone and message that it conveys of, just the value of family and the like finding oneself and who you want to be, that kind of thing. It's just such a well done story in that sense, as well as the filmmaking of it too. Timothée Chalamet's in this one too. He plays kind of like the love interest, and he's really good in it. But it's really cool because it's kind of a love story, but it's only like half a love story because a lot of it is just to do with the family of the sisters of the Little Women, as well as the main character kind of like figuring out, who she is and what she wants in life, that kind of thing. So it's just a really like inspiring story when it comes to following your passions and stuff like that. It's got really good cast. You know, there's tons of people in it and whatnot, and I really enjoy that one. It's
Cool.
definitely one that brings me a lot of joy.
Well, that's one that's been on my radar that I haven't seen, but I just added it to my list. The only version I
Hmm.
have is the one from the 30s with Katharine Hepburn.
Oh yeah,
It's the only one I have, but I need to see
yeah.
that
That's the
one.
one you picked up in that Facebook call recently, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So, but I
I
need to
watched
see
that
that one.
video last night. I couldn't believe you found someone selling stuff like right in your wheelhouse. I was like, that's crazy.
Well, it was funny because we ended up laughing. We're just hanging out in her living room with her
Yeah.
music, with her movie collection, and I was just laughing with her because I was like, and she was probably 30 years older than I am, and
Hmm.
I was just laughing, saying all my friends and family make fun of me because I love these movies, and so to find someone who
Yeah.
has a collection of these movies is so rare.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I did enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a good one. I had never seen any of the Little Women stuff before. I maybe watched the '90s one once or twice, but I have no memories of it. But that's definitely, I'd say, the definitive version, at least for me.
Yeah.
And my wife loved that one too. And she's the one who grew up watching, you know, like the '90s and '80s version, I think, or something like that. So
Okay.
she loves that movie too.
Well, definitely check it out, man. I've added to my list today.
Awesome.
Well, these are great lists, man. I appreciate it. And I know
Yeah.
people
I
watching this will
was
love it.
somewhat concerned because I know you and I have a lot of similar film interests, even though you're more into like classic films from, you know, like the 30s through the 50s and stuff, but we still have very similar film interests. So I was like, I hope a
Sure.
number of my movies are ones he hasn't seen before.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings, I'm glad that made an appearance today.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's another one I would have thrown on that last segment of movies that just bring me joy and laughter, because
Absolutely.
those are just a given.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Do you have some stuff coming up on your channel you want to make people aware of that we
um,
can be looking forward to?
I am planning on doing, I don't think it's going to happen this week, but I think next week I'm going to do another live stream on the channel where I
Nice.
talk about like the movies I've been watching lately, because it's been about a month and I want to try to do that about once a month or so. So that's the one thing I'm figuring out. And I've actually, I think, pretty much mapped out. I'm not always good at mapping out my videos of when I want to release them and stuff. So I'll come up with ideas in batches. So I'll come up with a bunch of ideas, and then I'll totally like wring myself dry and be like, great, I got to give up my channel. I got no more ideas. so
Yeah.
I think I got everything mapped out through the end of like October. I always look
Oh,
forward to
wow.
October because I feel like it's a really good chance to talk about like specifically the horror genre from a Christian perspective and stuff. So I always look forward to October because of that. So I already got a number of video ideas for that, just because that's one, because I think I started my channel in October, the year I started it. So I
Okay.
kind of did a video or two within that kind of genre. And like you probably know, I'm not someone who's hugely into horror. I wasn't really into horror up until a few years ago, but I've just in exposing myself to it, learned a lot from it. And I feel like there's a lot that specifically the Christian community can learn from it, even though it's kind of like the black sheep of, we just don't talk about that genre of filmmaking.
Sure.
So I always look forward to that time of year to be able to talk about that from my perspective and try and not necessarily change people's minds, but at least open up their eyes to the possibility of something different.
Well, Stephanie at Movie Chatter, her idea made me laugh so hard that I have to watch a horror film that she recommends to me, and then
Hmm.
she watches like a Christmas movie or something that I
Yeah.
recommend to her. But what's so
Yeah.
funny to me about it is I feel like I'm the one on the losing end of this one. Like I'm the one who's going to be
Yeah.
terrified when I go to sleep at night, and
Yeah.
she'll
Yeah.
be
She's just
fine.
watching a normal movie.
So, because my horror is like it's Frankenstein from the 30s, it's Invisible Man, it's all
Hmm.
the Universal monster stuff.
Yeah. Hmm.
Only modern day, I think it lands in the horror genre would be like A Quiet Place.
Yeah.
I think
Hmm.
that's like probably borderline thriller, maybe.
Yeah. Hmm.
But
Yeah.
so we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe this October I'll branch out.
Hmm.
We'll see.
Yeah. I started with a lot of like the classics. So that's kind of how I started
Okay.
getting into, with like Halloween and like Friday the 13th and stuff. So I got in with like the classics first and then started watching other stuff. But yeah, this October, the big video I'm planning on doing is entry level horror movies, something along
Okay.
those lines. So like movies to kind of like, not necessarily horror movies, but like movies that'll kind of like maybe, just get your foot in the water kind of thing, just to
Yeah.
try it out. But it's movies like Jaws, Quiet Place, that kind of thing. So I think I got a list of like 10 or 12 movies for people who are, I've always kind of like been cautiously interested in the genre, but don't know exactly where to start. So, and since I kind of went through that a few years ago when I was getting into it, I kind of wanted to recommend based on kind of my experience with it. So that's
Cool.
one that I'm really looking forward to doing come October.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to watching that one as someone who does not have much horror in their collection. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll be leaning on you and Stephanie to gently guide me
Yeah.
into the genre. So
Yeah.
well, cool, man. I really appreciate your channel, Austin, and always enjoy watching your content. So thanks for all the stuff you're putting up, man.
Yeah. Thank you. I
Cool.
enjoy checking your stuff out too. It's fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks for doing this, man. I really enjoying getting to meet some of the YouTubers who I've been watching their
Yeah.
content for well over a year
Yeah.
now. So yeah, so
Yeah.
thanks for taking
I'm
the
glad we
time.
got to do this. Even since we made the plan for it, it's been a few weeks coming. We kept having to push it off. So I'm glad we found the time to make it work.
I know. We and having been away last week, everything that I was planning on filming got bumped, and
Yeah.
so glad we could make it work out for today, though.
Yeah, me too. Good.
Cool, man. Well, I'm going to have in the description below, I'm going to have all your links to Instagram and
Okay.
YouTube. So that'll all be there. Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
Cool. Well, thanks so much, man. I hope you have an awesome day.
Thanks. You too.
All right. Take care, Austin.
You too.
All right. Friends, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I really had a great time getting a chance to talk with Austin about his films that he loves and his film collection. And so anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Please do subscribe to his channel. He's got a great channel. Follow him on Instagram. All that information is down below. So anyway, friends, if you enjoyed this, please do hit like, subscribe if you want more of this kind of content. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I really do appreciate it. Please do take care of yourself, and we'll see you next time.